Welcome to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people conform to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. But first, thank you for subscribing to the channel and for all those likes. Today we have 4 great stories, so let's get right into them, shall we? The first story is called Just Do As Your Supervisor Tells You to Do. This happened more than 10 years ago. 2 to 3 months into my first job out of education, I'm working as a croupier. I was enjoying it. That didn't last, fitting in nicely, etc. One day I'm dealing a game, give out a payment and carry on. My supervisor questions me whether I paid out correctly. I say I think I did and went over my calculations, which were correct. I'm at the stage where people can see I'm picking everything up quickly, so I have been afforded just enough respect, but the supervisor isn't sure himself. He got it checked on the camera with the pit boss. And even though my calculations were correct, the chips I got out were not. I paid out slightly too much. Not a big deal to be honest, but I did get taken aside by the pit boss a while after and basically told that if the supervisor says I'm wrong in these situations, to just go along with it. The chain of command in casinos is very rigid, to the point where to question something a superior says or does can be treated with contempt in most circumstances. It was a very informal chat and I get along with both the supervisor and pit boss, but the message is clear. Do as the supervisor says under any circumstance. This is no problem to me, it was my error. And yeah, these guys are going to be right over me at this stage in my career far more than the other way around. The very next night I'm dealing a far bigger game with the only big punter of note in the building. Realistically, I shouldn't have been on this game with my experience level, but what the heck, I'm being trusted enough to do it, so let's have a good time. The first big payout comes. I'm slightly hesitant but get my chips out and ask the supervisor to check the payout. A different guy from the night previous, but someone else I really get along with. He has a brief look and exclaims, "You're short 10 pinks, mate." A pink in the casino is a 100-pound chip, so I'm a grand short. I have a look, there is no way I am that far out. At this point I'm not 100% sure I'm right, but I am 100% sure he is wrong. My personality is definitely the one where I would try to go through this with him to see if we can reach an agreement. However, the words of the previous night are ringing in my ears. Do not go against the supervisor, just do what they say. Okay, no problem. I get a grand more, get the check, the supervisor is happy and the money gets paid out. This happens roughly 5 or 6 more times, ranging from 500 more to a whopping 2,500 more one spin. Each time I do as I'm told. I get replaced a while later with the punter delighted to be leaving with a heavy profit and I go on break. While on my break, the guy who I considered my mentor at the time is also there and I go through the spins with him. His immediate reaction is, "Every one of those has been overpaid. I would talk to the pit boss when you go back down." I head back down, the casino is basically completely empty, so before I go stand at a game with no punters, I ask the pit boss for a word. I explain what I believe has happened and ask just for a quick check on the cameras as, yeah, I might be wrong, but I don't think I am. The reaction of the pit boss was essentially, "Don't worry about it, mate. I was watching the whole game, everything looked above board to me. Even though you lost money, good job on keeping the game moving." I plead one last time to just have a look, nothing is going on right now. He sends me on my way to a table directly facing him at the desk and he does have a look. The next 10 minutes I can only describe as the soul of a man slowly draining out of his body. With each spin he watches, the corners of his lips drop little by little, the color of his face lightening second by second, and his posture haunching each view. Of course I'm standing there, just watching him as he gets the manager over, followed by the deputy manager, who was also there and definitely keeping an eye on the game. Towards the end of the shift, the pit boss informs me that, yes, I was right, I've paid out roughly 7,500 more than I should have. This was a significant amount of money for the casino at the time. Fairly quiet, but a big chain of casinos, so nothing catastrophic. Internally, I'm freaking out. But calm as a cucumber on the outside, I say to him exactly what he said to me the night before. I was just paying out what the supervisor told me to. For the record, the chances of the supervisor working with the punter were slim to none. He was just distracted by the totty on the other table trying to chat them up. An investigation comes up with a neutral manager who wasn't present at the time. The key part of the investigation boiled down to, on the games in question, you got the payout right every single time. I was internally dancing at hearing this bit. But every time, your supervisor tells you to add more and you do and pay out. Were you aware that you may be right and he may be wrong in these instances? I was aware I may be right, but I was by no means 100% and I trusted someone with 20+ years experience to be right over me. If you thought you might have been right, why not question it at the time? Well, the night before, I was explicitly told to do as my supervisor says under all circumstances, not to even think about arguing the toss, and nothing bad can happen. Not to mention that this would not have even been brought to anyone's attention if I hadn't said anything. Considering the supervisor, pit boss, manager, or even the deputy general manager didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. A good half a minute of silence followed this. I'm in this weird mental state where I'm scared that they are just going to sack me, but also thinking, wow, I'm actually the only competent person in this whole situation. What follows was a verbal warning for myself. Definitely shouldn't have even got that and should have appealed, but was happy to just take it and prove myself from there on, with everyone else involved getting written warnings and more. However, I was essentially rewarded with being able to learn a new game, which helped push my rage up a decent amount and got a fair bit of respect with the boys for basically showing everyone else up. Oh, and I never saw that punter again. The next story is called Don't Touch It. Until recently, I worked at a fine dining restaurant. I was there for 3.5 years, and the majority of the time I was a busser. By the time I left, I was the most tenured person in the front of the house by a fair margin, including managers, which we burned through ridiculously quickly. Everyone I directly worked with had good things to say about my work ethic and how I was with the guests. I could be abrasive as a person, but if I was in your section, you'd have a smooth night, professionally. Our restaurant was 90% reservation. One wasn't required, but if you wanted a table at a certain time, you made one. On occasion, we'd have walk-ins or someone wouldn't show up to their reservation. But the number of covers, people you walked into was usually pretty spot on to what you end up doing. Most of them were for two, but we'd also take larger tables. If the night was all two-tops, we wouldn't set up for anything else, and anything bigger than a four-top, we'd have to push tables together. This was not an issue, but a little time-consuming to make sure every server was cool with the placement. Setup took between 2 and 3 hours, depending on how busy we were. Lastly, you'd figure out how busy we were from an iPad the host used. Or that's how I did it. One winter we had a shake-up. We had a new manager from our corporate parent take an open spot for a short-term contract. We'll call him Dave. He quickly became one of my favorite managers. He was pretty no-nonsense and respected that he didn't know how our restaurant ran. Thus, he was open to talking through our reasoning and basically expected that we were good at what we did, unless we proved otherwise. Our hosts were mostly young women or old girls, like still in or just out of high school. In several instances, it was their first job ever, because the compensation was, and still is, pretty crappy. You'd get what you pay for, and many of them didn't have the refinement one would expect when paying over $100 a head before tax, tip and alcohol. One, who we'll call Kay, was pretty protective of the iPad, at least when it came to me. When I came in, I would breeze up to the host stand, look at the numbers for a minute, then go set up. She apparently brought up that I would do this for no reason to Dave and to his boss, who told Dave to get me to knock it off so HR wouldn't have to mediate. HR involvement would have looked bad for basically everyone. She never got upset when anyone else looked at the spread of tables, but I digress. He asked why I was touching the iPad. I responded that I was looking at the numbers, the big tops, special requests for tables, stuff like that. He asked why I wouldn't wait until pre-shift for that. I told him that was 15 minutes before service. I might be able to change things in time if that happened, but I'd missed the rest of pre-shift, and if I had to put together tables, the restaurant would be at least partially not set. He asked specifically what I needed, and I told him a breakdown of the tables by time is what I looked at. He said he'd make sure he had one when I came in and told me not to touch the iPad again. Cool, that works for me. The next day I come in and it's waiting for me. Handwritten, because the app we use doesn't play well with printers. The day after I asked him for it and he said he had forgotten, he'd get it to me. It took him half an hour to write it out and to double check that he didn't miss anything. The malicious compliance here is twofold. At some point between day 2 and 3, Dave realizes that he has other stuff to do rather than write out the spread of tables every day. He's been asked to not let me touch the iPad, and I've told him I won't. So he talks to Kay and tells her she needs to write it out, and it needs to be done by the time I get in, about half an hour after she does. She, like Dave, realizes it's a lot of work for something I'll look at for 30 seconds, and asks him to let me look at the iPad again. Sorry, no can do, we've gotten complaints and we don't want HR to get involved. Kay comes to me and offers me the iPad when I get in. Sorry, I've been given a direct order. I'll take the spread when you're done writing it up though. I'd planned on relenting after a week, but the servers ended up loving seeing what was coming in ran. and it became a staple of the host jobs from then on. Kay ended up quitting after getting into it with another manager, but her contribution of a handwritten spread by the host is still going strong, as far as I know. The third story is called I Don't Know. Many moons ago I was doing my thesis at university and had a difficult supervisor. She was highly intelligent and very supportive and easy to get along with, about 80% of the time. But sometimes she'd just flip, and the supportive and easy to get along with would turn into the Spanish Inquisition. We'd be talking about different ideas, and she'd ask for my thoughts, and I'd somehow say something she didn't like and get a series of aggressive, rapid-fire questions, as if I were being cross-examined in a courtroom. Why'd you think that? I don't know. I guess it seemed like, what is this based on? It's just an idea, I'm not necessarily saying that. You don't understand the research. And so on. I'd get aggressively questioned and would leave the room as a nervous wreck. I wasn't used to this kind of situation, so it made me increasingly anxious about our weekly meetings. And I'd spent the whole meeting carefully figuring out how to not set her off, rather than how best to do my research. I spoke to her other PhD students, and they also said they experienced the same thing, but had as little an idea of how to handle it as I did. I spoke to a senior professor who said he totally agreed that this happened with her, and it was a problem, but offered no help other than being a sympathetic ear. I considered dropping out and doing the thesis again the next year, but then I would lose a whole year. Not something I wanted to do. I was already a mature-aged student. And I didn't want to officially complain, because it's a university and politics abounds. Then it dawned on me. I could just answer her questions honestly and stop being defensive. So when she suddenly got triggered by something, I'd just give her the minimum basic answer and not give her anything to work with. What makes you think that? Pause. Dead stare. I don't know. You don't know the research. Okay. I stare at her and wait for her to ask an actual question. So I basically used this tactic and it worked reasonably well. Every time that happened, I'd become completely unhelpful and answer with as little information as possible. Ask me a question where no answer is good enough? Then I don't know. Tell me I'm doing a crappy job. Fine, okay. It worked well enough. I got through the next few months of honors, and the moment I didn't need anything from her, severed ties and moved on. Looking back, I should have told her she was out of line and been upfront, but I was too young to know how to do that. And this kind of rocked. The last story is called Major Management Fail. The company I worked for at the time got a major contract to provide life insurance products to the major bank in the country. So they set up a team that would deal with only the larger contracts, over £1 million, and promised really quick turnaround times and high customer service standards. They set this team up before the contract was set up. So this team of go-getters sat around for 6 weeks with no work and no managers, waiting for the applications to come in, which caused some major cliques and rivalries. So when the paperwork started coming in, we didn't work together at all. Our manager was pretty useless and just fueled the fires. And her boss was just a useless lad who took ladies back to the offices after nights out. He was so useless and was a guy who used other people's work to say how great he was. He also bullied our manager and tried to get us to do more work with less customer service. I remember being specifically told I couldn't give customer service, but just get people off the phone to process more applications. So 6 months after the contract started, the company wanted to know if we had been following our contracted turnaround times. So we did an audit of all the cases to see if we had hit our contracted agreed turnaround time. And we hadn't hit any on any of the cases. We told our manager, who said just forward the spreadsheets to her, who then forwarded to her boss pointing out the issues, who didn't read the email because he was too busy being the big man, and forwarded to the bank. The proverbial hit the fan. We were reorganized and he was put on projects, which usually meant in that company being managed out. Somehow he redeemed himself and was put in charge of a call center that missed every target again. And he was finally sacked. We got more support and the agreement was changed, so we had realistic service agreements. The service was expanded to the whole of the company for higher net worth applications and moved into the underwriting department. And with that, we end today's video. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories and today's video? I hope you enjoyed the video. And I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.